there is a shift from formal institutions to informal decision-making structures. The lines between domestic and foreign policy areas are getting more and more blurred, particularly in populist and more authoritarian systems that are also at the same time highly competitive, because you have constant elections, because that keeps the bases mobilized. And in this context, foreign policy issues are a welcome instrument to mobilize the voters. Using foreign policy issues for domestic ends is a kind of cheap way to mobilize the own electorate. This region is also very much kind of associated in people's heads with authoritarianism or authoritarian regimes and military regimes and so on and so forth. What's fascinating and what often is lost out of the sight is that you have in many places strong grassroots movements and that are really trying to change things in a authoritarian and hostile environment, but at least on a community or local level. If we're talking about Turkey, for instance, you have a strong women's movement that has become even stronger because the government has been more and more authoritarian. It's a reaction to authoritarianism, and it's a reaction to male-dominated politics that many women in urban areas with higher education are getting mobilized and become activists against repression and for women's rights. So I think these are developments that are often lost out of sight, and I think it's important to mention that as well. You had these kind of developments in developing countries, so to say, in the periphery, but now you see at the very core of like the Western democratic world, you see similar developments. And of course, it's kind of tempting to look for similar examples in the past. And it's striking when you read accounts of developments in the 1930s, end of 1920s, and in the 1930s, leading up then, unfortunately, to the Second World War, the rise of fascism and National Socialism in Germany. When you read Hannah Arendt or your account by Mark Mazower on developments in the 1930s in Europe, it's you find really a lot of similarities between then and the developments we are going through now. But I think we are living in a different world. I mean, just think of social media, of the interconnectedness and interdependence of world societies, and the number of educated people. And at the same time, we shouldn't forget that the rise of fascism and National Socialism back then was also very much influenced by the fear of communism, and we don't have a similar factor right now. So I think there are differences. So it's important to remember what happened and to see it as alarm bells, and not to fall into the same traps again. But I don't think it's just a repetition of what we've gone through in the 1930s. Democracy is, I mean, talking about democracy is something that is not a given. You know, it is something you have to constantly fight for. It needs to be developed. It can, because it can also go in regression. You know, it's so I think it's something that needs constant work. It's like a relationship. You know, you can't trust a relationship just because it's there. You know, you have to do something for it.